Well, hello friends, and welcome to another Ask Zach. Today we are going to talk about the great Roy Buchanan. So this is the third in our Bakersfield trilogy. It started with Buck Owens and Don Rich, went on to Roy Nichols, and now we're going to end this Bakersfield trilogy with Roy Buchanan. And you might not think of him as a Bakersfield guy, but he was, and I'll tell you the connection. So today, of course, going to talk a little bit about the history of Roy and talk about some of his recordings and his gear. And of course, I'll have a Spotify playlist and just do that. So while you're thinking about it, if you haven't subscribed already, please go down in the corner. If you've already subscribed, I appreciate you supporting the show. So there's tip jar information in the description. There at askzach.com. There is a store where you can pick up a shirt. This is the latest design. It's kind of an A to Z, Ask Zach. And then there's all sorts of fun guitar words like J-FET and clipping diodes and yellow astron and all sorts of stuff. Also, there's Friends of Ask Zach, which you can find out about, again, at askzach.com. And that's a way to support the channel on a monthly basis. And I'm very grateful for everyone's support. All right, Roy Buchanan. So I guess I'll start with how I was exposed to Roy. And that was about the summer before my senior year of high school. I really started getting into country music. And about a year later, I started playing with a country band that was all guys that were older than my father. And they were all, solid players, and they were all really kind, and they were all really good to me, even though I was, really, though I had showed some talent and, of course, kind of focus and desire, I wasn't there yet. And so they really helped me out a lot. All of them did. The one that helped me out the most was the pedal steel player named Bill McCumber, who lives in Alice, Texas, and I'm glad to know him and still know him. And he was kind enough to loan me a big old stack of vinyl records. And in it was like Jimmy Bryant and Speedy West, Merle Haggard stuff, Buck Owens, Ernest Tubb, even like Jesse McReynolds playing electric mandolin through an Echoplex on this one album that was really cool. But one of them that was in there, this was sorry, I've got a little grounding issue, was this Roy Buchanan album. So the first one. And this one was the most kind of aggressive of all the albums on there. Obviously you had, Jimmy Bryant playing fast and things like that. But this was a little more, it was a little more edgy than the other albums. And so that was my, exposure to him. And of course I enjoyed it. And so then I started digging, and of course I found old, guitar magazines, and, I started buying other albums of his, and, started really getting under the Roy Buchanan influence. And I think it's kind of hard to be a Tele player and not either be influenced directly by Roy or be influenced by kind of his disciples, which there are many. There are many that are influenced by Roy. So let's talk about Roy. Roy was born September 23rd, 1939 in Ozark, Arkansas. But he his family soon moved to Pixley, California, which was right outside of Bakersfield. And so this is where you get the Buck and Roy Nichols, connection. So Buchanan decided he wanted to learn how to play guitar, and he first played lap steel guitar and was learning how to play the tunes of the day, which would have been like Hank Williams, you know, Hey Good Lookin' and things like that. Some tunes that kind of popped up later on in some of his live stuff when, you know, playing guitar on. And he, you know, talked about, you know, some of his early influences in interviews. And he said there was this great guitar player that played with Tommy Collins. And, you know, he influenced me a lot. And later on, he became a singer. His name is Buck Owens. I thought that was really cool. So Buck's guitar playing was an influence on Roy Buchanan, and you know, and kind of getting going. And so he made the switch from lap steel to regular, you know, Spanish guitar. And he was also influenced by Roy Nichols. So Roy Nichols was another, you know, Bakersfield, you know, guitar player. So he might have seen him, you know, doing shows with the Maddox brothers or Lefty Frizzell, but who knows? But he also, you know, listed Roy Nichols as an influence. And, you know, of course, Roy was, you know, had this jazzy side, but also had this really cool bending side that I'm sure, you know, was an influence on Buchanan. So Roy, you know, he got his big break playing on Dale Hawkins' My Babe. Now at this point, he's playing a Gibson archtop. He's not, you know, playing the Telecaster yet. And it's unclear when he really started playing the Tele, but we know that, you know, playing, you know, with Dale Hawkins and stuff, he was playing a Gibson archtop. And so you can hear that sound and that's on the Spotify playlist, you know, the Dale Hawkins' My Babe. Then he started playing with, because that gig ended up kind of being a dead end, and he started playing with Bob Luman, and you know, it was actually Joe Osborne, who later is known for his bass playing and being part of the Wrecking Crew. Joe Osborne was still a guitar player at this point, and so the two of them started playing with Bob Luman, and it's at this point that Roy officially starts playing a Telecaster. And that's because they actually had one guitar, you know, between Joe and Roy that they kind of traded back and forth. And they also had a K bass. And depending on if the tune, you know, who played the tune better, they would kind of switch back and forth, because there was Bob Luman, but also he had a female vocalist in the band. And so, you know, they would just kind of switch back and forth playing, you know, guitar and bass until finally, Osborne decided he was going to go, you know, full on and be a bass player. And James Burton actually came down and hired Joe Osborne away from Bob Luman's band. So then you get into Roy's kind of early recordings with the Telecaster. So he did some recordings with Bobby Gregg. You know, there's The Jam, and there's also Potato Peeler. And Potato Peeler's first one where you hear him doing the pinch harmonics. You know, then also you have his first recording of After Hours, which was in like 63, I think. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, maybe 62. Yeah, no, 1960. So 1960 he recorded After Hours. And then, of course, he had those other tunes, The Jam and Potato Peeler, that came in 62. So, yeah, he was already kind of, and I'll put a link to those recordings because some of those aren't on Spotify, but I'll put a link in the description. And when you hear those, you can hear that his playing style is kind of getting, you know, he really sounds like Roy. You know, when you listen to My Babe, you know, with Dale Hawkins, it's kind of like, yeah, I can hear something, but he doesn't sound that different from somebody, you know, kind of aping Scotty Moore and other, you know, 50s guitar players. So it's really with After Hours and Potato Peeler and The Jam that you really start hearing, you know, the Roy Buchanan style come forth. Then, you know, of course, you have a period where he played with the British Walkers, which was an American band trying to be, you know, British because of the British invasion. And then, you know, Roy kind of takes you know, he moves to the DC area and he starts, you know, playing in bands, you know, around there. And he has flirtations with, you know, playing in bands. And he thinks about quitting playing. He starts learning to be a barber. Yeah, you have all these different things that happen. And then, you know, when you get up to around 70, 71, that's when, you know, there were some writers from you know, the local papers that start, you know, making these, you know, kind of quite big statements about Roy, saying he's like the best, rock guitar player in the world, and he's playing at a club, here in DC. And people start, going down to the club called the Crossroads, and they start going to see Roy play. And much to the chagrin of the Danny Denver, the the headliner frontman, that people are there to see the guitar player. And finally, there was a show that some guys from a PBS station came to, and they really thought he had a compelling story and was a great player. And so they filmed the documentary called Introducing Roy Buchanan, and that's available. You can find that on YouTube, and it's really interesting. And I'll just take a brief aside here and just say that Roy at times liked to embellish the truth. And, he liked to say things like he was a werewolf, and like his dad was a Pentecostal preacher, and that the Stones asked him to play. And there's all these things that are not true. But what's sad about that is that, just the truth was good enough with Roy Buchanan. There was enough, with his playing and such, that he didn't really need to embellish it, but he did. And, there's so many, crazy things that he would say to get attention and things like that. So, but we're just going to focus on, on the playing. So after the PBS, special, then you get the record deal with Polydor. And again, grounding issue. And you get, the first album, which this is by far my favorite. I like the fact it's more country influenced, of course, which I am. And, so you have Sweet Dreams, you have A Lonesome Fugitive, you have Cajun, you have John's Blues, Haunted House, The Messiah Will Come Again, Hey Good Lookin', Pete's Blues. And this was just his band. Went up to New York and they just cut these tunes. And, these tunes weren't like heavily worked up or anything. They're just like, hey, let's cut this and let's cut this. And, it has a very spontaneous feel. And of course, some of the critics, of Roy would say, that liked him, would say, here's this amazing guitar player, and he would play these mediocre tunes just so he could get to the solo and do something that would blow your head off. And there is that element at times on his albums where he would take some tired old tune and play it just so that he could do some killer guitar solo that'd rip your head off, after just kind of playing simple rhythm and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm not going to be that harsh on Roy by any means, but yeah. And, and when you get to second album, it's kind of a big departure. I love this album too, but by this time they're really trying to push him more to a rock audience. And so the tunes are more rock oriented and they're more, blues oriented. And there's kind of the country influence, and country tunes are gone. They're just completely gone. I think part of it was because he was playing with Danny Denver, before that, and, and they were doing a lot of country songs. So this starts to become more of the true Roy Buchanan. I'm not sure, but, he kind of didn't really do any country tunes after that. But I like second album, and part of the glory of second album is this, back cover shot of him, with his 53 Tele Nancy. And, it's just seeing how yellowed it is and how worn it is. And again, this is 72, 73. And, it was a guitar that he played all the time, and, probably had a little bit of wear on it when he got it. All right, let's talk about his mini playing techniques. First you had just, how he would just take some tune, like on the first album, he takes, the Lonesome Fugitive, and you have the way, Burton, played it on the original Haggard tune. You have this. Sorry for the out of tuneness. So you have that kind of thing. And then basically he turns it up a little louder and he kind of rakes the strings, and he just adds a lot more energy. So you get this kind of thing. just a lot more energy than the Haggard version. But, to go along with what the critics have said is that, yes, the rest of the tune wasn't as good as Haggard's version, but then you have this highly energized, solo where he puts all this, a lot more energy in it than, maybe what the Merle had on his, and maybe more than what they wanted. So, techniques. Besides just kind of these highly charged solos, he had, of course, the volume swells. Then you also had the tone control thing, and I'm sure he got this from old, steel players, because steel players, would play, and they had, the tone control and volume controls were right there near their, and most of the time they were playing with a thumb pick and finger picks, and they would, mess that and get this kind of wah-wah sound. Also, Fender and others had volume pedals that up and down were volume, and they had a side-to-side swivel that would do tone change. So, but he would use it very much in a bluesy way, more in that sense. You also have his, pinch harmonics. So, of course, you've got the harmonics like this where you play an octave above. This is what you call artificial harmonic. But then you have this, and it works best on the bridge pickup because it pops out more, is one, he would use these little Fender jazz picks, and then he would get his thumb, the flesh of his thumb right on the edge there, and you'd get this kind of thing. So you have that kind of thing, which, especially with the amp turned up really loud, it really squeals and pops out. And that's a neat, technique. You also have he would do like these crazy chromatic things, climbing up the neck, just to add tension. You also he had this technique where he could use his fingers kind of like a Spanish, technique that he would, hit, and wow. Yeah. And he could play these really fast runs up and down the neck. Another thing would be, his neck pickup tone was, I think, informed by the fact that he would have the amp turned up quite loud, and then he would control it with the guitar. So even though he had the amp on 10, and everything's on 10 except for the verb would be on 3 or whatever, but he would control it with the pick. And I have to say, using these little Fender jazz picks, this is a Fender Heavy 358, which is like he used, and he used the tortoise or white. And it's kind of like using a scalpel instead of a butter knife to play with. And if you turn up, so I'm just turned up to 4, and then have the guitar all the way up and on the neck pickup, and if you play really lightly, you start to get some of that Roy Buchanan thing, because you have all this dynamic range available to you, because you can play really, really softly, and then you can, just dig in a little bit, or you can dig in a lot. That's a really nice thing that you can do when you have your amp turned up louder, and then you play softer. It gives you this big dynamic range. I know a lot of blues guys will do that. Turn the amp up to 10 and control it all with the volume control on the guitar, and then also with the touch of the pick. You also have things like the guitar part, like on Haunted House, which is, just just, you know, and, you know, muting. So that kind of thing. So yeah, so Roy had all of these, you know, great techniques, you know, that he kind of, you know, brought together. And yeah, and again, I think it's hard not to be influenced directly by Roy or by all the people that were influenced by him, because so many people learned about using the volume and tone controls on a Telecaster, you know, in a musical way to do volume swells or to do the wah-wah effect from him or from Danny Gatton, who learned from Roy. And you know, and then you have, you know, the behind the nut bends and all these other things, and yes, there were other people doing those, but Roy was on a big stage because of the special appearances, like on Austin City Limits. He was in, you know, guitar magazines, and you know, he was being, you know, featured a lot. So yeah, talk about his gear. You know, of course, you know, we know for sure he started playing a Tele around 1960. And then, of course, you know, late in the 60s, or 70 or so, he got his 53 Tele called Nancy. One of the things that is, you know, there's a lot of conjecture over the bridge pickup. And all I can say is that, and the conjecture is that the pickup was shorted out and it wouldn't take a reading. And some people say, well, that's what happened, you know, after that it got messed up by somebody, and that's why he stopped playing the guitar or what have you. But all I can say is this guitar, when I got it, the pickup was in the same kind of condition. It would make sound, but it would not meter at all. And of course, since then it's been rewound and fixed. But I have to say, it sounded more Roy Buchanan. And it was the first thing I thought when I plugged it in. And you, of course, I had to turn up the amp really loud. It was like, this kind of sounds like Roy Buchanan. And it kind of had less bass, and it had a really interesting, snarly sound. So anyway, yeah. And then, of course, again, you know, he used these little jazz picks, which they're kind of addictive. They're quite fun. You know, he used, you know, probably used black diamond strings early on, and he was one of the early guys to figure out you could take a banjo string and use it for your high E, and then you could, you know, take one of the ball ends and use it on the loop end of the banjo string and then move everything up. So that would give you an unwound third string and a lighter set, because all of a sudden you were using the A string for the low E string and on down. Then, you know, by the time Fender started making their rock and roll set, that was 10, 13, 15, 26, 32, 38. And it was the wound strings are pure nickel, you know, wound on a round core. That's kind of what he used quite a bit in the later 60s and in the early 70s when he made his records. And then beyond that, you know, not sure. You know, he probably used whatever strings he could get, whether it was Fender or Ernie Ball or D'Addario or whoever. Yeah, you know, he played Nancy a lot. Then he started playing some other guitars. He started playing a Strat. He started playing, you know, a white, you know, like mid-50s Tele with a black guard on it. He played a Guild guitar for a while. He played an early 80s Fender, you know, kind of standard Telecaster with a rosewood board and a black pick guard with Bill Lawrence pickups. Played that for a while. Then at the end, he played a Fritz Brothers guitar, which had 3 EMG pickups. So it had the normal kind of Tele setup and then a Strat pickup in the middle. And those were sunburst with white binding, and they had a interesting woodwork at the end of the fretboard. And those were neat guitars. And of course, it was neat that George Harrison, you know, played one of those for a bit on the like on the live album that he did in Japan with Clapton's band. So yeah, you know, and of course, yeah, he had the Vibrolux was kind of his amp. He used a 410 Tweed Bassman for a time, but then he kind of got into the Vibrolux thing, and he would, you know, he used a black face one, silver face one. He used just all sorts of Vibroluxes. and he turned it around. And I think he turned it around because, probably the guitar would have gone, would have had a lot of feedback, and probably, was able to control the feedback better, and you get it when he wanted it. And also he wouldn't kill the crowd as bad, with the highs and everything off that off that bridge pickup that was probably, partially shorted out. And, later on he used like jazz choruses and Marshall, half stacks and all sorts of things, and started using pedals. He started using like a Boss DD2 and a Boss chorus and some other things, later on. And of course, in '88 he passed away, and that was really, really sad and unfortunate. So, yeah, but he left quite a legacy of great recordings, which I would say, you could get by with just getting the first 2 albums. Livestock and some of those other things are great too, but I really enjoyed just those first 2 albums the most. Let's talk a little bit more about let's cover that lick on Cajun, what I was playing at the beginning, and I love this lick. So what you're doing there is you're going between basically a C chord and a B flat chord, and the B flat actually has a flat 5 to it. And this is not hard to play especially, but it's more about, pick and fingers. And so you're playing on the A, D, and G strings, and you need to have and this. So, and you just kind of keep the whole thing going with your fingers like this. On the you have 2 fingers on the A string, and then you have this middle finger on the 2nd fret on the D string. And I'll just play it real slowly because it's kind of, you got to kind of hammer on and pull off kind of thing. Just kind of showing what the fingers are doing, what these fingers are doing, just the right hand, And then I really like this tune to be, it's a great tune to practice, for getting your picking clean, because it's kind of, a fiddle tune. You have the then you have kind of the B section, you have the and there are variations where he bends up. Yeah. Then also in the tune, I really like the kind of melodic riffs that he does, because instead of just going off and playing a bunch of notes, he'll go. Or you have this. So those are really, really fun licks to learn and play. And I think Cajun's a good, kind of picking exercise tune. So you can kind of start playing it really slow and then, get to playing it faster and such. And here, let me show some of the things that were helpful for me in getting this episode ready. Kind of give credit where credit is due. One is this great book by Phil Carson, Roy Buchanan, American Axe, and this is a great history, and I think he does a good job of respectfully dispelling some of the untruths or the embellishments that Roy Buchanan did through the years. This is an old Guitar Player magazine from '76, where Roy actually wrote the article himself, and he's talking about different, techniques and different things. And even in that, he kind of he mentions that his father was a Pentecostal preacher. He wasn't, and yeah. So, but this was helpful too, and yeah. So yeah, and that Phil Carson book is a really good deep dive if you want to go deeper. And of course, there's a Spotify playlist. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening and watching today. Again, I want to thank everyone who has supported the show. Friends of Ask Zach, picking up a piece of merch, tip jar, all appreciated. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.